Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Positive Proof Podcast. I'm your host, Parmis, and I'm so glad that you're here. If you want to listen to more episodes like this one on self-improvement, mindset, and wellness, go ahead and hit that follow button to join the family. Before I get into today's episode, I just want to ask you guys for a quick and kind favor, and that is if you have not yet left a rating, I would absolutely love it if you could do so. It helps so much to build this podcast and increase the positive impact we make, so I'd love it if you could do that for me. Today's episode is going to be very, very exciting for two reasons. One, we have our first ever video recorded podcast. So if you are tuning in from YouTube or Spotify, hello, I'm so glad you're able to put a face to the name, especially if you don't follow me on socials. And two, we have a very special guest today who specializes in gut health and digestion, which is personally one of my favorite topics to learn about. So I cannot wait to dive in. Our guest today is Hannah, the host of the Nutrient Dense podcast, and she has helped over 1,000 clients conquer gas, bloating, pain, and food sensitivities. And she's here to share her expertise and insights on gut health issues and much, much more. Welcome, Hannah, to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
And before we get into today's episode, I just want to give you a chance to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and just your personal journey and what inspired you to get into this field and what inspired you to start your podcast.
Oh my gosh, yes. I'm excited. I'm excited to share all the gut health love with everyone today. So thanks for having me. For those that don't know me, my name's Hannah Aylward. I'm the CEO and founder of Han. And at Han, we really help women overcome chronic digestive issues. Typically, it's after they've tried a lot of things to kind of move through these digestive issues and had no luck. So a lot of the times they'll be told all of their labs look normal. You know, they'll go to the doctor, everything looks okay, but they're still kind of struggling with chronic bloating, indigestion, gas, constipation, diarrhea, lots of food reactions, maybe even skin issues like acne, eczema that won't go away with topical intervention. So we really just dig deeper and help to repair the gut at the root cause level. And we utilize things like functional labs and targeted nutrition and customized supplement protocols to really get in there and do that. So I feel, I'm sure you can already tell, very passionately about this work. I love this work so much. I think the gut is so important. And I really got into all of it because I had my own chronic digestive issues. You know, I would eat very healthy. I've always, not always, but for a lot of my adult life, I was eating a very healthy diet. I was eating lots of whole foods. I wasn't eating any gluten, any dairy, any processed sugar. I barely drank alcohol. And I was still looking like 6 months pregnant with belly bloat at the end of the day. And it got to the point where I found myself skipping meals because I just wanted to go out with my girlfriends and be able to wear my high-waisted black jeans that I loved. So it really started impacting my life and definitely, hit my confidence and hit my mental health as well. I started definitely over analyzing everything I was eating. I was very scared to eat out. I was packing all my supplements, my snacks everywhere that I went. And no one could really give me any answers. I was young. I've always exercised. I was eating very well, and I was still dealing with all of these digestive issues. And I just knew something else had to be going on. Even though I definitely questioned whether I was just broken or not and would deal with it for the rest of my life. So I really just dove headfirst into the functional medicine space and functional gut health and started to learn all about gut health and gut function that kind of goes beyond the food that we're eating. Of course, our nutrition is incredibly important, but there's a lot more to the gut environment and the gut ecosystem that can play a role here. So yeah, that's a little bit of how I got into that. And now I'm very happy to say I don't deal with these chronic digestive issues anymore. I can travel freely. I don't have to watch every little thing that I eat. And my life is just so much easier on the other side.
Thank you so much for the background. And I feel like a lot of people can relate because it's so common, but it's also so complex. So there's not a lot of information out there. And if there is, they're all contradicting. So it's going to be nice to hear your expertise and opinion on everything. So for listeners who are unfamiliar with the whole gut digestion space, can you really define what root cause gut health means?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when we're looking at things like bloating and constipation, you may have, for anyone struggling with that, you may have gone to your doctor and maybe you've gone to your gastroenterologist after your GP. And if you're dealing with something like constipation, they may just put you on a laxative, right? To help to move the bowels. And we view that differently. So, and when we see someone with constipation, we're not going to say oh, go take this laxative. So we're forcing the bowels to move. We're going to ask, why do you have constipation. Where is this constipation like coming from? Where's it stemming from? And how can we address this at the root cause? I like to say we're like, looking under the hood. What's contributing to the constipation? What's contributing to the bloating? Because that's where we're really going to see the best results for clients when we address these underlying issues. So that could be many different things, from like maldigestion, low stomach acid production, poor digestive enzyme secretion. It could be something as simple as like lack of fiber. I'd say for most of the clients that we see, that's not the case, because like people are so educated and they're learning so much. They're already trialing a lot of this stuff. But sometimes that's it. And then we could have like sluggish motility. We could have a lot of bacterial imbalances in the gut that can cause something like constipation. So that's just an example for those listening to kind of better understand like how we're viewing things. We're not going to go, oh, you have constipation, let's take a laxative. And we're also not going to go, oh, just take, you have diarrhea, let's take something to kind of stop that up. We're going to ask, why do you have this and where is it coming from? And that's really what I consider like a root cause approach.
Got it. That's very interesting. And, I've heard that fiber is one of the most common kind of reasons for gut digestion issues. Obviously, you've worked with over 1,000 clients and you've mentioned that that's actually not the case. So what are some of the most prevalent issues you see, and why do you think they're so common in today's world?
Oh my goodness. I think I could do a whole podcast on just that question alone. So many things here. So when it comes to fiber, the biggest study that we have ever done on the gut microbiome, the American Gut Project, essentially shows us that getting in enough fiber through different plants and increasing our plant diversity to ideally like 30 plus different plant foods a week. That's not just veggies. That would be like nuts and seeds and, whole grains and herbs and spices and veggies and fruits. So for anyone that's like, oh my gosh, 30, I'm never going to get 30 in, there's like, you really can when you really look at it. But that study was really showing us that eating these fibers is going to help to build a strong and resilient gut microbiome. So fiber is necessary. There's kind of like a trend on social right now where people are like, eating only meat and they're just not eating any fiber. And I fear for their long-term health so much. But fiber, it has so many benefits. I mean, it helps bind to excess cholesterol. It helps bind to toxins in the body and helps us excrete them out of the body. Like it's so important for our overall health. Typically when people are reacting to lots of fibers, there's a deeper issue. There's a gut microbial issue that's kind of causing the big time gas and bloating that's coming after eating the fiber. So if you feel like a little sensitive to, eating a whole bowl of beans, I would say that's like more so normal. If you feel like you can't eat a salad because you look 6 months pregnant with bloating, that's when we know we have another kind of like issue going on. So there's always something deeper to kind of dig into. I always say like, don't blame the food for what the food didn't cause. Don't blame the food for what your gut dysbiosis or these microbial imbalances are causing, or your chronic stress and poor digestive function are causing. Because I just want people to be mindful of just stripping lots of different like foods out of their diet.
Okay. Yeah. There's definitely a lot to unpack here, because I feel like fiber is such a big topic and big subject to go over, and there's so much information on it. So many people experience constipation, myself included. That might be TMI. But when I go on vacation, I find that I don't have any bowel movements for even up to a week. And the fiber supplements just don't cut it. So I'm curious to know, is it the fiber supplements that's the issue, or is it the environment that I'm in?
I think there could be many different things. So sometimes when people go and they travel, you're out of your normal routine. So your gut has its own like circadian rhythm, just like, we want to wake up with the sun and we want to go to bed when the sun goes down. Your gut has its own circadian rhythm. So when you're shifting your kind of like routine, the times at which you're eating as well, that can disrupt things a little bit. But personally, I dealt with constipation as well when traveling. And I always thought it was my nervous system. Like I was just like, I couldn't control everything. So I was like stressing out because I was, traveling and out of my environment. But then when I did deeper gut testing, I had a bunch of dysbiosis. And ever since I cleaned that up, I don't have constipation when I travel anymore, which is like a game changer. A game changer. Cause you don't want to wear your cute outfits when you're like constipated. It sucks, quite frankly. Really so there's other little hacks that we can trial too, we can get into if you want.
It's so funny that you say that, because every time I go on vacation, I pack my, very tight outfits for the first few days. And then I have to pack my more looser outfits for the last few. And it sucks. It really does. So I feel you on that, but I guess you don't deal with it anymore. So I'll have to look into that for curing it long term. Getting more into bloating, is there a correlation between bloating and age?
It's an interesting question. I would say yes and no. Oh gosh, there's so many ways that I could take this one as well. But essentially, as we get older, we do start to, like, our digestive capacity decreases a little bit. So, as we get older, we'll produce less stomach acid, and then that can also contribute to producing less pancreatic enzymes. And these are like our digestive juices that we need to actually break down our food and assimilate the nutrients from our food. So that typically won't happen until we're hitting like 60, so if you're not quite there yet, it's probably not likely. But what also is kind of happening is just like the wear and tear of life on your body. So the more years that you have maybe eating a poor diet or chronic stress, or eating a really restrictive diet, maybe like a lot of like yo-yo dieting in the past. That was one of the things that contributed to a lot of my digestive issues. All of those things are going to like mess up your gut microbiome. And then additional years of, potentially medication use, antibiotic use, all of these things are interfering with the gut microbiome. So that's not like a causation. That's more like correlation. It's like, okay, if all of these things are kind of contributing to this gut dysfunction and this imbalance in the gut environment, we could see how as time goes on, things kind of just get like worse and worse. The other thing could also just be like hormones, especially, for women, our hormones are shifting all of the time. And when we see like big ups or big downs in different hormones, whether it's estrogen or progesterone, that can also impact our digestive function and contribute to things like bloating. So I could see how, as we get older, we could kind of have more bloating or more digestive issues, but there's so much that we can do to like navigate that and reduce that.
Awesome. And on that note of navigating how to overcome that, there's something that came to mind. And I say this because I've heard in terms of blood sugar, if you eat your protein first, then it helps stabilize your blood sugar. So I'm just kind of trying to connect the dots. Is it the same in terms of bloating, food sensitivity, where if you eat a certain food first, it might kind of soften the symptoms that you deal with after?
Yeah, that's a good question. So when we're looking at things like, food combining, because sometimes people say like, oh, you can't eat cheese with grains, or you don't want to eat meat with this or whatever. The scientific literature doesn't really show us that. Like essentially after you swallow something and it's going into your digestive tract, it's all being churned together anyway. With that being said, I mean, listen to your body, honestly. If you feel like, if you have this meal and you eat fruit after you eat the meal and then you notice more bloating, then you have your answer. I don't think we need like a scientific study for everything. Like listen to how it feels, but overall, not really. But on the blood sugar front, for sure. Yeah. Eating your protein and your fiber before your carbohydrates can be really helpful. And then, just really like making sure that you're chewing very well, that you're digesting everything very well. I think that's gonna be more important than like eating your salad before your pasta or whatever.
That's a big one. I actually find that I used to eat so quickly, and only in recent years have I really paid attention to that and really slowed down my chewing. And I've noticed such a big difference in everything, so that, I think that's really important for the listeners to know as well, is chewing is so important. And you don't really think about it because it kind of seems like it's such a small step to take, but
it's very powerful. Yeah. And I always say, like, we don't have teeth anywhere else in our digestive tract, only our mouth, right? So after we swallow that food, you're essentially purely relying on your digestive juices to do the rest of the work and break everything down. So if you're just like swallowing these huge chunks of food, you're hoping that you have good digestive juice production. And a lot of people are chronically stressed and they're lacking a little bit there, So aim to chew really to like applesauce consistency. That's the goal.
And you touched on stress just now. So does stress play a role in the digestive juices is in just overall digestion.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's so strong. Like the gut brain connection is so strong. And essentially when we are under a lot of stress, our nervous system is going to go into that fight or flight state. A lot of people are kind of familiar with that, right? That sympathetic dominant fight or flight state. The opposite of that is our parasympathetic, or literally our rest and digest. I mean, it's called like rest and digest. That's where we want to be to optimally digest our food. So when we're in that fight or flight state, our digestive juices are going to decrease. So like we'll produce less stomach acid. Our gut motility will also be impacted. The blood flow is going to go away from our GI organs. And then also with that increase in stress comes an increase in that stress hormone cortisol, which can then wear away at the gut lining. And that can cause a lot of like bloating and food sensitivities and things like that. So it's a very, very strong connection. So for people that are kind of listening and are like, I'm not even thinking, I'm just like eating my food while I'm answering emails and I'm in between meetings. I get it. I mean, I'm not immune to this stuff. You know, I have a busy like schedule myself. So a little hack is like, try to take 6 deep belly breaths before each meal. It's not going to take you that much time. Like a big inhale through your nose, big exhale out of your mouth, really filling up that lower belly. And if you can elongate your exhale a little bit longer, so if you inhale for 4 and you exhale for 6, or you can inhale for 3, exhale for 4. I mean, whatever feels best in your body, that's going to help shift your nervous system into that parasympathetic, which is then going to like, you'll literally digest your food better and you'll experience less bloating and constipation, things like that in that state.
Wow, that's very interesting. I need to try that one out because I have not heard about that before. So I feel like it would be so useful. I take deep breaths in between, my work breaks, and it helps so much with stress. So I can only imagine how much it helps with food digestion.
Mm-hmm. I love that. That's great. Good for you.
Definitely. We'll be giving that a try. Okay. Histamine and food sensitivities. I don't think a lot of people know what histamine intolerance is. So maybe can you start off by telling us what a histamine response is and why some people are more prone to it than others?
Yep. Totally. So, I do feel like right now histamine's also having a moment. It's having like a moment on social. So it's great to be able to like touch on these things so people really know what the heck is going on. So yes, I mean, histamine intolerance, I kind of call it more like histamine overload. So you can think of it as like a bucket, and you've got this histamine bucket, and you're getting exposure to histamines like all the time through our environment, things like pollen, things like mold spores. You're getting exposure to histamine through lots of the food that we're eating. Lots of healthy foods too, right? Like avocado and spinach and even lemon can be a histamine liberator. So it's not like good or bad. The body can typically regulate these histamine levels. So think of this bucket, and it's like, if you have all of these things that are contributing to filling up this bucket and you can't break down the histamine efficiently enough, that's when the bucket's going to start to overflow. And that's when we're going to get super symptomatic. Like we see a lot of people with histamine overload, and they're very reactive, very sensitive. Lots of bloating, lots of different food sensitivities, typically like sensitivity to supplements. It's not a fun place to be. And I've dealt with it personally as well. So the histamine like overload or intolerance picture essentially means that you can't break down histamine as quickly as as that bucket's like filling up, as quickly as you're getting the exposure to it. And there's many different like root cause reasons why that could be happening. And I'll keep this brief because it'll get like really sciencey for people. But essentially we can have gut dysbiosis, which is really just like an imbalance of our gut bacteria. Some of these bacteria are histamine producers or histamine liberators. So it's like you're trying to not get too much exposure through the food that you're eating, but then you've got all these gut bugs that are just producing it nonstop, and you can't break it down efficiently. You can't break it down quickly enough. We have like certain liver issues that can contribute to that as well. We also have our gut lining. So our gut lining is the enzyme, the main enzyme that helps to break down histamine is DAO, and that is really produced in our gut lining. So any issues in the gut lining can also contribute to more of that histamine overload picture because we can't break it down efficiently. And then sometimes it's environmental stuff too. So if you're living in like a moldy environment, a moldy home, mold is a mast cell liberator. I've dealt with that too. absolutely awful. I feel for anyone that's been through that. But there's so much that we can do and that we can help you feel so much better. So that's the good news. But essentially you're just going to be getting that exposure like all day long. So your body can't break it down efficiently enough. And then the mold will also impact your liver function. And then you're getting too much exposure and then you can't break it down. So there's quite a bit. Other nutrient deficiencies like B6 and copper can also play a role. So that's kind of once again reflective of like our work. Like we don't want to just reduce the histamine through your diet and trial something like a low histamine diet, which can be helpful for some, but it's not that root cause solution. We want to ask like, why do you have to use this diet in the first place? Let's dig into that. So you don't have to like live on this restrictive diet forever. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure. And so I guess it's a 2-portion thing. First is the exposure to histamine, and then, how you break it down. And if there's an imbalance in that, you're going to be dealing with some issues.
Yeah, essentially, yes. And then there is a hormone component too. So that's probably important to note. Like, so when we're looking at these different root causes, right, it's like, could be environment, could be gut bugs, could be gut lining, and then also hormones. So if you have, and this is why, so many women are struggling with this because usually when we see clients, they've got like a little bit of all of this, but you add in that estrogen picture. So when we have excessive estrogen or increased estrogen and histamine kind of like play this little dance together, where when estrogen goes up, histamine goes up. So that's also why one of the kind of signs that you may be struggling with histamine overload or histamine intolerance would be feeling really bad around ovulation. So that kind of like midpoint in your cycle, that it's different for everyone. It's usually like 14 to maybe 18 days for most people. Tracking your cycle can be super helpful. So you can like get this real data on your body. But that's when estrogen's gonna kind of like rise and hit its peak before it plummets, which is why when women have these issues, they're feeling like they should feel good at ovulation. You should feel like juicy and ready to go and energized. And that's when you can do your more intense exercise and all of that. But instead they're like super symptomatic, bloated, maybe even getting rashes, migraines, things like that. Those are all kind of some signs of that histamine overload picture.
Wow. I'm quite literally mind blown. I would have never thought there's a link between ovulation and histamine.
Yeah.
But I think about it, I'm going to have to actually track it and monitor it and see maybe why I'm dealing with these issues at a certain point in the month over others, which I guess in that case, that's my answer.
Yeah. It's so helpful to have this data on your own body. Cause like we can run so many fun, like functional labs, and we can do functional stool testing and hormone testing and all of that. But tracking your cycle, it's like so simple and free, once you kind of get the hang of it. So just kind of identifying for anyone listening, just like taking note. When do you feel best in your cycle and when do you feel worse? And that's going to, inform us with like what could be going on.
Mm-hmm. And so in terms of identifying these triggers and how to go about it, I'm sure you have your own process when you work with clients. Other than tracking your ovulation and doing testing, is there anything else that people can look out for to identify these triggers?
Yeah. So typically you'll be super sensitive to foods that are higher in histamine. So you could always play around with that. Like I really don't recommend a low histamine diet for a long-term solution. But if you're listening to this and you're like, wait, this could be me, let me just see, you could always trial like taking out these foods that are higher in histamine and see how you feel. If you feel a lot better, we probably have our answer. We don't really have our answer in regards to like where it's coming from, but we can really tell like, okay, this could be a problem for you. So, foods that are higher in histamine are going to be fermented foods. So things like kimchi and sauerkraut, leftovers that have been kind of sitting around for a little while, which is it can be a tricky one for people. Collagen, bone broth, these things are really high in histamine. So it can feel very confusing for people because they're like, sauerkraut and bone broth are good for my gut. What's going on? Like I'm eating these things and I feel way worse. And it's really just because they're high in histamine. They're not bad for you. They're actually good for your gut. It's just like they may not work for you right now if you've got this excess histamine. So really like the aged foods, aged cheeses, aged meats, like cured meats, wine, super histamine-y. Like when I was struggling before I knew any of this, and I was just like, my symptoms were all over the map. I would have like 3 sips of red wine and it'd be organic. I'd be with my girlfriends. I'd have like 3 sips of wine and then I would sound congested and they'd be like, are you sick? And I'm like, no, I don't know what's going on. And I would get immediately congested after like just a couple sips because I was having a histamine reaction and I just didn't even know what that was. back then.
Oh my goodness.
So
I can totally relate. Every time I will drink any sort of alcohol, sorry for my dog's background, if you can hear him, I always get congested as well. And not only that, I get really flushed cheeks. So I get super pink, super red. And I'm assuming that's also for the same reason, right?
yeah, it totally can be. So those like histamine, I say histamine symptoms are going to be like flushing of the face. You can get headaches and migraines. You can even feel anxiety. So like sometimes people will get heart palpitations. It can, because they can influence the brain. Like it's essentially like has an impact on neurotransmitters. So we can feel anxiety, racing heartbeat. So it can feel almost like kind of scary for some people, getting a rush, getting a flush. And then also diarrhea, bloating. Typically people that have like rosacea have like a histamine overload situation. I'm trying to think of what else, other symptoms wise. Yeah, painful, like really bad, painful PMS. There's so many different things that can be linked back to it. But yeah, if you find yourself like super reactive to alcohol, it could be playing a role. I mean, alcohol is not good for us. We know that, but I feel like most people should be able to have a little bit and not have like an immediate serious reaction.
Yeah, for sure. That's really good information. Definitely stuff I've never heard about. So I'm really excited to dive deeper into my own life and just kind of monitor all my symptoms. So the next thing I want to talk about is I got a food sensitivity test years and years ago, and I know it was really common at the time. I'm sure it's still common now. People get them done all the time. And the one that I had gotten done, it was either green, yellow, or red, red being you're super intolerant to that food. And there were certain foods on there that made total sense because I would always feel pain after consuming that food, such as trout for me was a big one. But then there was also foods on there like, milk or cottage cheese or yogurt that I was in the red for, but now I can consume them and I feel fine. So with that said, is there a way to train your body so that you become less intolerant to those foods, or is it a myth, or does things just change over time?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's so important. And I feel like I'm like constantly screaming this from the rooftops because I just don't want people taking out or being afraid of foods. Like we don't need to fear foods. And I think those tests can cause so much fear, when you get these results and it's like red all over the map and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm eating these foods all the time. So food sensitivity testing, it's very inaccurate, especially like an IgG food sensitivity test. When it's checking for IgG antibodies, it's a specific response from the immune system, different than an allergy, which would be an IgE antibody. It's like the functional space, the medical space. No one agrees on what a food sensitivity like even truly is. So these IgG antibodies that we're seeing can actually show that your body has like previous exposure to these foods. It doesn't necessarily mean that your body is sensitive to these foods. And that's also why very often people's test results come back and they're like, these are the foods I'm eating all the time. Or they're like, oh, I just ate this food 2 days ago, yesterday. And then it's like, I'm showing a quote unquote sensitivity. And that's not necessarily the case. Of course, like in your case, if you feel like this food makes me feel sick, yeah, take it out. We kind of have our answer, but I really advise on like people to not spend money on these tests because it can lead to a lot of food fear. It can lead to a lot of food anxiety, and it's still not getting to the root cause of the issue. So to kind of like circle back on your question, we can change the gut and we can change tolerance to foods. I want to be a little mindful of saying that. I'm not saying we can like overcome your peanut allergy. However, typically when we're taking out a lot of these foods, because we're quote unquote sensitive, there's a deeper gut issue at play. So we see clients all the time be able to reintroduce dairy, be able to eat cheese when they haven't in 10 years, be able to tolerate onions and apples and garlic and all of these other foods that were previously causing them issues. And they were causing them issues before due to deeper like imbalances in the gut environment. And that's a very kind of like broad explanation of it. But for example, if a lot of times like parasitic infections can cause big issues with digesting dairy, poor digestion, not enough stomach acid, not enough pancreatic enzymes can cause a big issue digesting dairy. So there's kind of other reasons that we can and things we can work on and optimize. And then we can get people, people are able to tolerate these foods again. So a true lactose intolerance, like you really can't eat it. It's always caused you issues. It's caused you issues since you were a little kid. I still would say maybe we can tweak it a little bit, but like that's kind of in a different category. If you have like a shellfish allergy, that's in a different category, right? I'm talking about foods that like over the years, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't really eat this anymore. I'm sensitive to this. There, we can make a lot of progress there.
And I guess there is a difference between an allergy and an intolerance, right?
Yep.
Which kind of aligns with what you said about the fact that, you can't change an allergy, but you can kind of change an intolerance to some extent.
Yep. Yeah. And like sensitivity. So I kind of put intolerances and sensitivities like in a similar bucket. It kind of doesn't really matter if it's an intolerance or a sensitivity because they're both stemming from deeper gut issues. So I don't really care like the terminology. I want to know what's going on in your gut that's not allowing you to tolerate these foods very well. Typically in the case of an intolerance, it's a digestive issue. So even in the case of lactose intolerance, the people aren't creating adequate enzymes to break down the milk protein, right? So it's not necessarily a bacterial issue, but it's more of a digestive issue. With a sensitivity, we could see it be a digestive function issue or a gut environment issue or both. So in both cases, I still want to dig deeper. With an allergy, we're getting a totally different response from the immune system. But I would always, if you've been told you have an allergy to a food where you're like, I've been eating that food and honestly, I don't really feel that different when I eat that food. I would still like, maybe question that as well. We've had clients come in who have like quote unquote egg allergies and then they're eating eggs after they leave my program and work with us. But if you experience, of course, like an anaphylactic shock, you need an EpiPen, like that's in a totally different bucket.
Got it. No, that's really good to know. Because I'm sure a lot of people probably confuse the two with each other. I used to call my intolerances allergies, but they were nowhere near allergies. So I think a lot of people are going to get excited about this next one, which touches on clear skin and the gut connection. Can you tell us what the link between gut health and clear skin is, and how can healing the gut help resolve chronic skin problems such as acne, rosacea, or eczema?
Yes, there is such a strong connection between the gut and the skin. Essentially, like your skin is showing, in most cases, it's a reflection of what's going on inside. It's a reflection of what's going on in your gut, and or nutrient deficiencies and blood sugar issues. So it's like when we're digging into root causes for chronic acne or things like eczema, we want to assess the gut. So to put it like very simply for people to understand, if you have a lot of I'll say gut dysbiosis. And when I'm saying dysbiosis, I just mean there's like an imbalance in your microorganism. So that could mean many different things. You could have not enough of your good gut bacteria. You could have too much of your quote unquote bad bacteria. You could have fungal overgrowth. That's very common in things like eczema. You could also have infections like a Helicobacter pylori infection. So I'll just kind of put all of those in like the dysbiosis bucket. Like things aren't right. Things aren't right and they're imbalanced in there. And when that's happening, that's going to cause inflammation and irritation on the gut lining or the gut barrier. And then when there is an increase in that barrier permeability, so a lot of people would call that like leaky gut. You may have heard of leaky gut, that your gut lining is leaky. We've got stuff kind of flowing through that gut lining and triggering that immune system. A large majority of our immune system's on the other side of that gut lining. So then the immune system is responding to that and it's activating inflammation. And so a lot of people talk about inflammation is, we have to decrease inflammation. That's involved in all these different disease states. But my question is always, well, what's driving the inflammation? And in a lot of times the gut is driving this inflammation because we don't want to just be like downing turmeric if we're not knowing where this is coming from, So the gut plays a huge role in that. So essentially like a lot of dysbiosis contributing to gut barrier issues that's then causing this like systemic like derm disease, which could be acne, eczema, psoriasis, rosacea, different like hives or like a lot of like dermatitis where people go in and their dermatologist doesn't really know. They're like, oh, I think it's just dermatitis and we're not really sure. A lot of the times there's a gut component to that as well. So I have a practitioner on my team who specializes in the gut skin connection and works with, because we'll see clients with like acne, they've been on Accutane, spironolactone, or eczema, rashes all over their body. So she's done a lot of advanced training in this connection. And she helps all of our clients in like our Clear Skin program. And we're essentially impacting the skin through the gut. So we're cleaning up the gut and then we're seeing that shift and change on the skin. And we'll do some topical work as well, because it's possible that there is some topical stuff. So acne can have like a different pH. The skin can have a different pH. There can be a bacterial overgrowth on the skin or a fungal overgrowth on the skin sometimes. So, it's not that it's never a topical thing, but very, very commonly, like if you feel like you've tried all the topicals, and especially if you also have digestive issues, like no question, it's coming from your gut.
Wow, that's so good to know, because I feel like so many people spend so much money on skin and facials and treatments, and it doesn't fix the problem from the inside out. So
absolutely,
I think people should be aware of that for sure. So I guess, is it fair to still ask, are there any particular foods or kind of nutrients that you recommend to focus on that inside out glow, or just in general to kind of as a quick fix?
Yeah, absolutely. So like things like omega-3 fatty acids are going to be wonderful for the skin, for the gut, for the gut as well, the gut barrier, the gut microbiome, but also for your skin barrier. And then it can also help to decrease inflammation. So you could get that in with something like a fish oil or a cod liver oil. You could also just increase your intake of omega-3 rich foods. So things like salmon, hemp seeds, those are all good things to add in. And then we have like vitamin A. So vitamin A is really important for our skin. A lot of people that are, really into skincare kind of already know that. So we can increase our food. Yeah, carrot juice. Carrot juice would be one. But carrots are full of beta carotene, and beta carotene is a form of vitamin A, but it's not retinol. So there's kind of two forms, beta carotene and retinol, and your body can convert beta carotene into retinol. So it's more like bioavailable and usable, but some people have an issue with that. So some people will be fine. Like their carrots, their body can convert it. It's usable. They're great. And some people it won't work as well for. So other foods that are going to be rich, like you want them rich in retinol or that form of vitamin A. So gosh, what would that fall into? Honestly, a lot of dairy is rich in retinol. So it's like another thing when we start to pull all of these foods out, because we hear that they're quote unquote bad for us, we can run into some of these issues. And things like beef liver, which I know maybe doesn't sound appealing to many, but you can supplement with it. I supplement with it. And then yes, you can also work to increase those like plant foods that are rich in beta carotene. So like sweet potatoes, carrots, things like that, can also be helpful. I would make sure you're getting in the others though too.
That's very interesting, because there was a time in my life where I was drinking the carrot juice nonstop, thinking I was getting my vitamin A and my skin would be glowing. And so it's good to know that it needs to be converted, and it needs to be converted well in order to do the work for your skin.
Yeah.
On the topic of kind of food ingredients, what about your opinion on greens powders or parasite cleanses or ginger shots? And I'm naming these three because they're so common and I always see them on social media. So I'd love to get your opinion on those.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, green powders, I'll start with that. I think they can be helpful. I think quality really matters. So there's like a very popular one. I won't drop names. I don't want to I'm not here to bring anyone down, but there's one that's very popular right now and it's not organic. And so when we're taking these greens and we're pulverizing them, so you're getting a larger amount in a little scoop. It's not like you're even eating, a couple pieces of romaine that isn't organic. I mean, it's taking all of these greens, pulverizing them and making it really concentrated, which is why they can be helpful and more powerful. But if it's not organic, I would be mindful of that. We want to aim for organic. We don't want it to be loaded with different pesticides. And then we also don't want it to be loaded with a lot of fillers. So just be mindful of quality when purchasing. And then sometimes too, unfortunately, when someone's building a supplement, they'll have the ingredients in there, but it'll just say proprietary blend. It'll say 2,450 milligrams of this proprietary blend. And then it'll list all of the ingredients, but we don't actually know how much of what it has in there. So it's this blend could be 30 ingredients long and you're fantastic. This has all these amazing greens. This is great. But it's possible that there's a lot of the ingredient that you don't really need so much because it's probably cheaper, and like less of the really like good stuff like the chlorella and the, chlorophyll and spirulina and stuff like that. So, I know that probably I don't want to overcomplicate it for people, but I would just be like, look to the brands that have been around a long time and get organic and go for those, or just like ask some questions, ask some questions when you are buying them. I don't think they're 100% necessary to live like a healthy lifestyle. But I think they can be extra helpful if you find that you can't get enough greens in during the day. If you are traveling, like I bring them when I'm traveling and I'm not going to get, I'm eating like out at restaurants and stuff, and I'm probably not going to get as many greens as I might get at home. I think they can be great for those instances. Parasite cleanses, proceed with caution. I would be just really mindful. I'd be really mindful. We totally see parasites. Like we see them in clients. We see them in stool testing. We work with clients through eradicating them. They're real. I mean, that's not really the question. It's just that, a lot of these like things go viral because they're showing all of these pictures. And I'm just like, there's no way that these are all parasites. Like it can be mucoid plaque. It can be like part of your intestinal lining. Like it's not necessarily that all of this stuff in these pictures is a parasite or many parasites. Most parasites are microscopic. You can't even see them. So, when we're working with clients and we're eradicating these parasites, like it's pretty rare that a client even like sees anything. Sometimes they will, but most of the time they won't, and we'll retest and the parasite's gone, So, definitely get support in this. And because a lot of the time too, a lot of these parasite cleanses will have these more broad spectrum antimicrobial herbs, and that can do more damage to your gut if it's not what you truly need. These things are still really strong. They're not antibiotics, but they're very powerful. Herbs are incredible and super powerful. So if you have not enough of your good gut bacteria that's causing your symptoms, taking something like this, like antiparasitic formula, it could cause more issues and more damage in the long run. So I would just say like, you really want to work with someone through this, and just be mindful and don't believe everything that you see on the internet.
Wow, that's really good to know, because I am guilty of doing the parasite cleanse, and I saw a thing or two that may have scared me or not, but it's good to know that it could have not. It was probably not what I thought it was, a parasite.
Yeah, and it depends. Yeah. I mean, how did you feel afterwards? How do you feel like it went?
I felt good after. I felt like I was less sluggish, but I also know that a lot of people can fall for placebo effects. So that also may have been the case.
Yeah. And it's, as long as it didn't like do any damage, you probably made out just fine. And the other reason why it can also help people is like a lot of people have bacterial overgrowth. So these herbs are, the wonderful thing about herbs is that a lot of them are antimicrobial in nature. So sometimes like an herb like oregano can help tackle bacteria, parasitic infections, and yeast. So it's like if you're taking something with that in it, you could also just be cleaning up some gut dysbiosis, and that will help some people feel better. But we just like the work that we do with clients, it's much more targeted, and we actually like run the lab so we know what we're looking at. And I think that if you're really struggling, like it's absolutely worth the investment in like your time and money to know what you're actually looking at versus just like, guessing with a bunch of stuff.
Got it. And then the last one, immune ginger shots or turmeric shots.
Yes. I think those are great. They're like, I don't think they're going to fix all your gut issues, but they're simple. They're food based. Like we're going to run into way less issues, when we're just using like, natural, like food-based things. So ginger is, it can be used as a prokinetic, which means like it can essentially help with your gut motility. So it can help with constipation. If you're on vacation and you're traveling and get access to a ginger shot, like do that. I was in Europe last summer with my boyfriend and we found these ginger shots everywhere. So I was just like downing these ginger shots everywhere that we went. And they were like so much cheaper than a ginger shot here. They were fantastic. And so yeah, I mean, picking those up, like very, very unlikely to do much harm. And it can help your gut motility. It does have some anti-inflammatory properties. So that one would get the okay for me.
Okay. That's really good to know. For all the listeners who give into trendy things online like I do, I think we can learn a thing or two here and maybe go with a personalized approach with an expert. So thank you so much for all that information. Now, I know a lot of people self-diagnose themselves, and I'm guilty of that as well. At what point should someone consider working with a gut health specialist like yourself and, do that rather than self-diagnosing?
Yeah. It's a good question. I would say in general, if you're experiencing a little bit of bloating here and there, it's probably not a huge issue. Like if you feel like you eat a plate of Brussels sprouts and then you're like a little bloated and gassy, that's going to be a bit more normal. Like the cruciferous veggies can definitely contribute to some bloating. Or if you go out and you're like, grabbing like pizza and beers with your friends and then you feel a little bloated after, I would say like, yeah, I mean, most people are going to feel that. But if you're someone who you wake up feeling bloated, you're not moving your bowels like at least once a day. So we want your bowels moving, having a good bowel movement at least once a day. And it's really important, you guys. It's especially for women. Like we can develop excess estrogen because we're not like moving it out of the body through our stool. So we want the bowels moving regularly. I'd say like 1 to 3 times a day. So if you're not going every day, don't ignore that. That's like a big thing that we want to pay attention to. If you find yourself running to the bathroom, if you feel bloated after eating a lot of like healthy foods, and most people will kind of resonate with that. They're like, I have to unbutton my pants. I'm not just like, oh, I don't feel like super great. It's like, I'm uncomfortable. And at this point it's getting like hard and I'm like, I'm starting to get in like pain. That's when we know there's a bigger issue. And when you feel like you've also already tried like adjusting your diet. So you're like, okay, I'm bloated. Let me see if I can reduce my dairy or reduce my sugar, like take out processed foods, take out gluten, and you're still dealing with these issues. There's very likely something else going on that we can look into and get you feeling a lot better. So I would say like, that's kind of the gauge that I use for people. A little bit more bloating, like the day of your period, not really a huge deal. If it's like impacting your quality of life, you're packing other outfits, you're saying no to going to grab dinner with your girlfriends, you don't want to take the trip because it's going to be too stressful for you because of your digestion, like that's when we need to definitely explore working with someone.
I know, you've worked with so many clients. So for those who are interested in working with you, could you walk us through a typical client journey from initial assessment to results and what they can expect basically?
Yeah, I love that. I need to make like a good graphic. This is a great question. So essentially, when we work with clients, we will do a lot of like intake forms. So we'll ask you a lot of questions about your health and your health, everything from your digestive health to your energy to your menstrual cycles, how those go, how long they are, how painful they are, a typical day of eating. Like we're going to collect a lot of information from you. And then we always run functional stool testing on our clients. So it is a stool test. So it's not the most glamorous. I've done it many times. This test like changed my life truly because I was doing all of the other stuff. I was taking the L-glutamine and the probiotics and I was doing the elimination diet and like nothing was fully getting resolved. I was feeling a little better, but I was like still struggling. So the test, it's not necessarily like the first starting point for everyone, but it changed my life. And that's why I do it. Like I was like, we've got to bring this in to help clients with this. So we will run a stool test on everyone. You complete it at home. Very simple. And then you just send it into the lab. We don't receive it. I don't get it. I won't get it. People are like, are you going to get this? I'm like, no. I just get the results. I just get the report. And then we'll get you into your first session. So we've got like different options, but every program option is going to have like a couple of sessions and we'll work together over the course of a few months because it doesn't change overnight. Like we need a little bit of time kind of like working all of this. And then protocols are going to look like nutrition strategy, customized supplement protocols to address these gut environment issues. So they can be helping to support digestive juices. They can be helping to decrease inflammation. They can be killing off a parasite or killing off, these bacterial overgrowths. And then some lifestyle stuff as well. So checking in with like, stress, sleep, happiness, joy, alignment. I believe all of these things really matter when it comes to our overall health. I don't think we can expect to eat a quote unquote perfect diet and then like, work this job that we like absolutely hate and we're like super out of alignment and expect to feel great. So, we have some lifestyle stuff that we can work on too, circadian rhythm work. We'll do a lot of like adrenal support as well. Most people are pretty exhausted and like cortisol dysregulation is very prevalent. So yeah, and then it'll be over the course of a few months. And then typically afterwards, like people are feeling a lot better. So they can eat a lot more foods without pain. They're not bloated all the time anymore. They have more energy, skin's clearing up. It's pretty cool work.
No, that's amazing. And I'm sure it's going to be very eye-opening for anyone that is ready to take that step. Now, if anyone's not ready to take that step, I know you share a lot on your podcast, the Nutrient Dense podcast. So for listeners who would like to tune in, what can they expect on there?
Yes. Oh my gosh, what a beautiful question. It's new. We launched it this year. So I'm still...
Congratulations.
Thank you. You know how much work it is. It's so much work. It's like having a whole other job, and it's definitely not my number one job. But it's great. And I really do love it because it gives me, the ability to go more in depth with people. So I'm very like active on Instagram, and I'm always taking questions and answering questions and speaking with the community and stuff. And I do mini trainings. But some of these topics get a bit more complex. So if you're interested in learning more about, like, I have an episode on food sensitivities, intolerances, and allergies, breaking it all down. I have an episode on, the different common gut imbalances, how to balance your blood sugar. Like, I'm teaching and educating on all of this. So if you're looking to just kind of learn more and see if it's a good next step, or just getting information from someone that I think, like, I really wanted to plug into the space where I could help people and I could be a voice for people, where it's like, we are practitioners. So we're seeing people every day. We're not just trialing concepts, right? Like, we have a lot of training in this, and then we're actively helping clients. So we're like seeing in the field what's working and what's not working and how people are responding. And I think that's really important, because a lot of the times when you see these people on like massive podcasts, right, and they're doctors, I mean, they're not even working with clients anymore. They're patients anymore because they're too big. So I wanted to kind of plug into that space where it's like, we're seeing clients, you can still work with us, and we have a lot of this like advanced training. And hopefully if you want to, just learn more and get a little nerdy, come on over.
I will definitely be tuning in, because again, this is my favorite topic, and I learned so much today. But no, it's good to know that people can get that information from multiple different angles. So if you guys want to tune in, again, it's called the Nutrient Dense podcast. Now, before I let you go, what is one common myth about gut health or digestion that you want to debunk?
So many. I could go on and on. I think, okay, so we touched on the parasite cleansing. I think that was good to hit on. Another kind of thing to debunk, I think my main message to people would be, you shouldn't have to pull out all of these foods to quote unquote heal your gut. Living on a very like restrictive diet where you're only eating, 10 foods, it's not actually healing your gut. We have to identify why you need such a restricted diet in the first place. We totally want to optimize nutrition. We want you eating healthy whole foods, balancing your blood sugar, getting in lots of nutrient density. That's all super important. But if you feel like you can't tolerate a lot of foods, like taking out more foods it's not going to get you the results that you want. It's not the answer. I just really like to emphasize that. So people just don't feel like they have to live on this restriction. You should be able to go out with your girlfriends and have a martini and eat some fries and feel okay, and not feel as good as you would if you had like salmon and veggies, but you should be able to kind of like bounce back and your life moves on. You're not like quote unquote paying for it for days afterwards.
And I think the ultimate goal is to solve the issue so that we can live more freely and happier and more comfortable and healthy, rather than kind of do vice versa and become more restrictive just so we can solve certain issues. But then we bring about other issues like unhappiness and restrictiveness. So I think that's really important to note as well. Thank you so much for all the information that you gave us today on today's episode. On that note, where can people find you to learn more about your work and just all of the information that you talked about today?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. So the Nutrient Dense podcast, as you mentioned, thank you. Please come on over, listen to that. We have a new episode every week on all sorts of different topics, all really functional health based with a lot of like science. So if you love the science, like research aspect of it, come on over there. And then you can find me on my Instagram. It's just Hannah Aylward, HHC. I'm very kind of like active there. I do weekly Q&As. I do mini trainings on different topics. I'm very much like, what do you guys want to hear about? How can I teach you more? And then our website is just hannahaylward.com, and you can read more about my team. You can book a call if interested and just kind of learn more a bit about what we do.
Yeah, awesome. And I will have all of her information linked in the description for you guys to check it out. And thank you so much again for joining today's episode. I learned so much, and I'm going to be applying every single tip you gave me today. But thanks again. And to everyone else, if you've made it this far, I appreciate you so much. And I can't wait to chat with you again in next week's episode. Lots of love, Parmis.